Hey, WordPress people, welcome back to the WPMRR WordPress Podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Travis Pastrana.
And you're listening to the WordPress Business Podcast. We got Travis Pastrana on the on the podcast this week. What's up, Travis? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I've just been driving my rally car and doing double front flips into my foam pit lately. So.
Oh yeah, the foam pit. I forgot about that. I always remember seeing that in like the X Games, like not actually in the X Games, but when they showed the athletes like practicing, it was like, whoa, that's such a cool way to be able to practice like doing triple backflips or triple front flips or whatever, because you don't want to practice that, regularly because you're crashing a lot. So yeah. Pretty
Unless
dope.
you completely miss the foam pit, like if you've seen Nitro Circus, the movie they did, then there's a guy who rides a street bike off their ramp and goes too fast and completely goes over the foam pit, his bike turns upside down, literally lands on his head like 50 yards farther. It's like the gnarliest thing you've ever seen, and the guy ends up just like, he's fine, he just has a broken leg. So street bike.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
lucky.
It's probably
lucky.
on YouTube. You should look at it.
Yeah. We'll include that in the show notes, I guess. We'll embed it right below the podcast episode if people want to see a gnarly foam pit miss. Cool. All right, we got Travis on the podcast this week, also known as Scott Bolinger. And did you pick this character because you do you kind of look like him, or are you just kind of like a motocross fan or something like that?
Yeah, I ride motocross and I've just been a fan of his for a long time. So
nice.
I like watching Supercross and things. He used to be a Supercross racer too. So just kind of into that like action sport world.
Yeah, nice. I didn't know that you were into that. We have a few things on the list of stuff I want to talk about here on the podcast, but we're going to start there, even though I didn't know we were going to start there. Is that something you've done for a while?
Yeah, in high school I did freestyle BMX, where we would go to skate parks and we would grind handrails and do like stuff like that, and made a video and kept doing that, and then transitioned to motocross. And then now that I have kids, I don't really have much time to haul my dirt bike to the track and be gone all day. So I'm doing downhill mountain biking now. So
nice. So you've kind of had the gauntlet of experiences. You've kind of done a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I like going on two wheels. It's kind of my thing, so it's fun.
Yeah. Is it more like a hobby for you, or have you kind of like competed in races and stuff? Is it more like a casual thing, or have you kind of tried to say, maybe I could excel at this? I've
raced a little bit, but not on mountain bikes. It's mostly just a hobby.
Yeah.
It's just
nice.
It's fun.
That's cool, man. I was never into like motocross myself. Like I never did that kind of stuff myself, but I would always watch the X Games, like a lot of kids, right? It's like the X Games are awesome. Watching people do these crazy, like, I don't even remember what they're called, but like you do like a flip and then you like take your butt off the seat and you put your hand on the seat and you're kind of like, woo, like flip it upside down.
Like a Superman or something.
Yeah. You ever do any of that stuff, or you kind of like keep your butt on the bike?
Yeah, no, I was never good enough to do any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool. Nice, man. Hey, this is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, because I talk to people, a lot of people I talk to like you, who I know how I've known for a while, and it's like, I get to learn something new about you, like totally randomly. Cool, man. So I think the first time we met at WordCamp US, this is the fun game of like, where did we actually meet for the first time? I feel like it was WordCamp US like 4 years ago or something. Maybe it was Post Status Publish. I think we met there like 4 years ago too. I don't know. Do you remember?
I don't remember specifically now. One of those.
Yeah, cool. You may not know this, but before we ever met, I was a big reader of your blog. And the first ever Black Friday sale that I did at WP Buffs was after reading your article on how to do a Black Friday sale. I think it was on scottbolinger.com. So nice. I have to thank you for that.
Cool. Glad somebody got something out of that post.
Yeah. It's funny. That's what I say when people like, I've had people come up to WordCamps and be like, oh, I heard this episode of this podcast. I'm like, oh, someone listened. I'm like, I'm glad you got like one thing out of it. That's cool.
Yeah, totally.
All right, usually I do intros at like the beginning of the show, but we got to talk about motocross and how we met and stuff. Why don't you give listeners a little bit of background about who you are, what you're up to with WordPress?
Yeah, so the main thing that I'm doing these days is AppPresser, which is mobile apps for WordPress sites. And that's kind of my main gig. And lately I have been, I have side projects here and there. My main thing, or my main side project lately, has been working a lot with like Gatsby and like static site generators and like serverless and React and sort of, just these cool new front end frameworks for the web. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening there. So I've been spending a lot of time just kind of learning and messing around with that kind of stuff.
Sweet. That all kind of sounds like it's like it can all kind of be part of each other. So I'm going to try and like break it up a little bit. Let's start with AppPresser stuff. I've seen a bunch of demos of AppPresser through the years, just like hanging out with you. And it's not something everybody knows about, though, like the connection of like how WordPress can like come into apps. What's AppPresser? What's it do?
Yeah, so it's a tool that allows you to bring your WordPress content into a mobile app and then submit that app to the iOS and Android app stores. And you can have an app on the app stores that has features that come with apps like push notifications or, camera or geolocation, whatever it is. And also be on the App Store, have your brand there, and the content is coming directly from WordPress. So a lot of people who use AppPresser have a client. They do like a, whatever it is, they have like a community or an event or something like that. They build a website and the client says, hey, I want an app. And they're like, well, I don't really know how to do an app. So they do some research, they find AppPresser, and then they're like, cool, I'm going to use this. They build the app with AppPresser. And the way that it works is we can pull in the WordPress content into your app through a few different ways, but using the WP API is one of them. So if you have like blog posts or events or WooCommerce products or LearnDash courses or like BuddyPress activity and groups and messages and things like that, you can put that all into the app. And we also have integration for things like membership sites. If you have protected content, people can actually log in using their same WordPress login and then view the protected content through the app. Or like in WooCommerce, they can purchase products through the app and they can, access their account by logging in through the app, and they can receive push notifications. So there's a lot of different use cases, and we do a really deep integration with WordPress, whereas most app builders are kind of like WordPress is just kind of like one or the other. You can just get some blog posts in and it's not really their thing. But we actually really dig deep and only do WordPress and integrate with a variety of plugins and really allow people to create more than just like an RSS feed of their blog posts.
That's sweet, man. It seems like this is the only application that I've seen that allows kind of WordPress users to bridge the gap between WordPress and the mobile app store. I think there's a lot of use cases for that. I'm sure in everyone's business, they have had a couple of ideas of like, well, how could I integrate with an actual app on someone's phone? Like everyone obviously wants to be mobile responsive, because if someone pulls up wpbuffs.com or wpmr.com or apppresser.com on their mobile device in the browser, you want it to be mobile friendly. But there are also applications for going outside of the browser and kind of pushing more into the app world. Kind of gives people like instant access almost, right? You just have to push the button on your screen instead of going through the browser and typing it in on your dinky little keyboard. That domain with my fat fingers doesn't really work too well.
Yeah, exactly. And you have other capabilities, like you can be on the App Store. So if people search for your brand, you show up there, you have that icon on the home screen so they can click and get to your content right away. And then there's stuff like it can be much faster than your website. It can be cached for offline. Things can be 100% offline. So, you can embed like videos and pages and things like that will just work while there are people on an airplane or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages, and push notifications is a big one. People always love those when you publish a new post or you update something for an event. You obviously want people to know about it. And right now there's the only way to do that is, at least for iOS, is through a native mobile app. Yeah.
I have personally a few occasions purchased things through apps, even like directly through apps. I think a lot of people like sell stuff on Instagram, but you can't really like sell things on the app of Instagram, right? You like will link out to your store or whatever and then buy it there. But
I think with Shopify you can. I've heard Shopify has some type of thing, but it's like only Shopify. I don't know. I don't know much about this, but I have heard at least Shopify has some type of integration with Instagram.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So Shopify, closed system. They want to own that for sure. I've downloaded the Touch of Modern app before, and I've bought things off there. I don't know if you know what Touch of Modern is. It's like this online store, like seems like it's kind of focused on millennials. Like they kind of got me roped in. I was like, oh, they have some kind of cool stuff on here. And I've bought things via their mobile app. Like they have a Touch of Modern. I think it's called like the Tomo app. And I've been on kind of scrolling through things, and I have bought things there in the past. So there's definitely room for, selling things on your website, whether it's desktop or mobile, but also selling things on the App Store. So yeah, this is a cool idea, man. At apppresser.com, 3 P's there in the middle, apppresser.com.
Yes, 3 P's.
And this kind of folds, I guess, into a little bit of the headless WordPress stuff you were talking about, since I assume, and I think you just mentioned this, but AppPresser hooks into WordPress via the REST API or other APIs?
Yeah, so AppPresser apps basically are headless WordPress sites, or decoupled, however you want to call it, because they're pulling in data from WordPress, and then they can also display that plus other stuff, and it will update when your content updates in WordPress, but it is not, part of your PHP. It's not using a theme or anything. It's just pulling the data into a separate application, which is like a separate website. And so a lot of the big thing these days, at least in my circles, is static site rendering, like with Gatsby, React-based front-end frameworks, like Frontity is one of them, using serverless technologies and things like that. And so when I see these things, I'm like, well, dang, we've been doing this for years, just in kind of a different form. And so looking at that, it's really interesting to me, because I've been really working with this technology for a while, so it's exciting. And then, so I've switched a couple of my sites over from straight WordPress installs to static Gatsby sites in a couple of different ways. And one of them I created I actually moved it off WordPress entirely to just Markdown and Gatsby, and just seeing these like incredible performance gains. It's unbelievable how fast it is, because it's just static HTML files. It's literally instant with zero hosting configuration on the cheapest hosting plan you could possibly get, which actually is free. So it's not like all this crazy varnish caching and paying some WordPress managed host to figure out all the caching and the invalidating for you. It's like, nope, you're literally just pushing static files. You can put on a free hosting account, and it is like faster than any website I've ever made. So I get really excited about that technology, because I'm like, dang, there's a lot of ways people can just have these super fast sites and not have to pay much for hosting, and it's super secure because there's nothing to hack. And it's also just fun to work with, because it's this new technology based on React. So that's been something I've been diving into lately.
Yeah, I've heard from a few people that this kind of headless WordPress is, if you really want a fast site and you want a secure site, there's not a lot of better options out there than this. What do you think the difference is in terms of like technical knowledge you need to know to go from using kind of pure WordPress to going headless WordPress is? I feel like there's kind of a gap where someone like me, I've been doing WordPress for, almost 10 years. Like I can obviously set up a WordPress site and spin up a site and all that based on WordPress, but I'm not a coder. I'm not highly technical like with React. Let's use me as an example. What do you think like I would have to do to be able to work on a site like this or build a site like this? Any technical skills I'd need? Any other kind of skills I'd need?
So the workflow is definitely different, and there is a bit of a learning curve. If you just want to spin up a Gatsby site or whatever framework, Frontity, and you want to just get your blog posts on there and get kind of a simple site, it's actually really, really simple, and you can kind of just follow the tutorial and just basically create a project, clone one of their projects, change the WordPress URL, and then just push it to GitHub. And you can use a host like Now or Netlify they will just look at your GitHub repo and just basically do everything for you and deploy it for you. So that kind of stuff is really easy. But when you get into actually customizing layouts and building custom stuff, then you have to know React, and you kind of have to know what's going on under the hood a little bit. And then if you want to, one of the big hurdles with this type of setup is that things don't always work out of the box, such as plugins. Anytime you're using an API, what you're getting is just data. It's basically text. It's JSON text. And so when you have like a plugin that's outputting a form, all you're going to get is text. So that means you're not going to get any of the PHP processing. You don't get the scripts or the styles that need to make this form work. So if you're doing something like Gravity Forms, you don't just like put your contact page into a Gatsby site and it automatically works. It has to be something completely different. The same goes with pretty much any plugin that's actually using any type of processing or like a layout builder like Beaver Builder or something. If you built this layout and you're like, cool, now I want it to be headless, it doesn't work that way. The Headless WordPress site is a completely separate thing that's not going to pull in like your Beaver Builder layout. There are some people working on stuff, like I think Elementor is actually working on some stuff to maybe pull in an Elementor layout into a static site. But these are things that are going to get easier over time. They're not quite easy yet. So it's kind of early right now, but what I see is that this is like this technology that is transforming the web, and there are not a lot of people in the WordPress world that are using it. And I think that needs to change. So I think developers such as myself and others can build these frameworks and these tools to make it easier to transfer over to Headless WordPress. But as of right now, it would be easiest if you just have like, say, a simple blog site that just has like text and images and video and things like that. It doesn't rely on a lot of plugins. That's the like low hanging fruit. But then when you want to get more complex than that, you probably need a developer involved who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like just as like a fun thought process, like what about moving like one of our sites to do something like that? And I'm thinking about like we have like affiliate program on WP Buffs, like that would all have to be moved over. Like we have like LearnDash all like fully set up in WPMRR. So like that's something that would obviously have to be moved over. So definitely like once the site gets more complex, it sounds like, or I guess like you said, is using more plugins for functionality, the more thought and probably like development costs are going to be incurred if you want to move over to something like headless. Yeah.
So it's more like if you know about this technology, then next time you find a project that works well for it from the beginning, you can be like, this is going to be headless, and you can architect it that way from the start. That would be the easiest way to do it. But not everything needs to be a static site. Not everything needs to be Jamstack, which is JavaScript APIs and markup, which is like, using all these technologies I'm talking about, like LearnDash and WooCommerce and things like that. Those could potentially be headless, but it's a lot of work and you don't necessarily need to do it that way. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for people building client sites especially if they're simpler ones, to be like, okay, we're going to do this headless and you're going to be paying like $0 a month for hosting. And it's going to be like this cool setup where you can still publish posts in WordPress. It's just going to go off to like Netlify and compile for you automatically. And it's going to be lightning fast. And I think clients would be really happy with that, where they're like, okay, so you can't get hacked because we're going to lock down your WordPress install, and all that's going to be on the public is your static site. So it's impossible to get hacked. Well, I shouldn't say impossible, but virtually impossible. And then it's going to be the fastest site you've ever seen in your life, and you're going to pay $0 a month for hosting. I think those are some pretty big like selling points that people can be pitching to clients. And even if they have to charge them a little bit more while they're kind of learning how to do this, I think it's worth it.
I think I have to agree with that. Any other advantages to going headless besides kind of like speed and security? I think obviously those are two huge advantages, but any other advantages kind of like from your background as a developer?
One of the things that I like is when you have a front end, a React-based front end, it basically serves as like a place where you can bring any content into. So you can then open up to other APIs and sites and not have to bring them into WordPress, but instead like WordPress will be like where the posts and pages and whatever else you want comes from. But then you can also pull like your products from Shopify into it. And you can also pull in, I don't know, like IMDb movie titles, or you can pull in events from like the meetup.com API. And I know you can do all these things in WordPress, but to me, it just makes more sense if you're going to be pulling these in to just pull them into a static front end. And this is like your Gatsby, guys from Gatsby use the term content mesh. And it's like this single place where all of your backend APIs come together into a really fast and flexible front end that's based on the latest web technologies.
Yeah, nice. I want to go back for a second, because you mentioned a couple times $0 hosting or free hosting for a site like this, a headless WordPress site. People who are used to WordPress are probably hearing that and thinking, okay, $0 hosting. Like I've heard of like shared hosting, which is like, $2 a month or $3 a month, whatever. But like $0 hosting, where is it hosted then? Like where does the website live? Can you talk a little bit more about what exactly it means to have like free or $0 hosting and like where does the website actually exist if on a server somewhere or something like that?
Yeah, so $0 a month, while technically possible, is probably not the best representation of it. So what I did, I had a site on WordPress. It was on WP Engine. I was paying $35 a month. I converted it off of WordPress to just use Markdown files and Gatsby, and I put it on Netlify, and my hosting bill went down to $0. When you're talking about headless WordPress, you do actually have to host a WordPress installation somewhere, and your Gatsby front end would be somewhere like Netlify or Now. Which would be free. So the hosting of the WordPress site itself still needs a database. It still needs maybe a URL somewhere. You could do like a DigitalOcean droplet for like $9 a month, or you could probably even host it locally on a client's computer, and then you would compile that and deploy it to Netlify, which would be free. So maybe like really cheap hosting is a better way to say it than free hosting.
Right. Okay.
But it depends on how you do it.
Depends on how you do it for sure. And that's Netlify, right? Netlify. Am I looking at the right site?
Yeah.
Cool. One workflow from local development to global.
Yeah, so that's one of the big static hosts. So the big ones right now are Netlify and Now. And so they are basically focusing on hosting these next generation web apps built on React. And not just React, but a lot of different frameworks. But basically, they handle stuff for you. Gatsby has this build process where you have to actually do this node build to generate all the static files, and then you just push the static files to the internet. But it is actually a dynamic build process. So with Netlify, you actually all you do is you push your change to GitHub, and then Netlify will pick that up and do the node build for you and push your static files out. So all you're doing is just committing to GitHub, which is really cool, and then they handle it for you. So this is kind of the next generation of web hosting, and it's really, really cool.
Very cool, man. Speaking of Git, I think I saw that they're getting ready for like an IPO, and they have a very high valuation, like a $3 billion valuation. So,
oh, really?
That's kind of cool. Yeah. I think I saw that recently. I don't know. You just said Git, and for some reason that's jogging my memory. Don't quote me on that, listeners. I don't know. Go look it up for yourself and make sure you don't listen to me on things. So it sounds like, again, coming from someone who's not super technical, it sounds like you do for sure need some technical chops to be able to handle this kind of stuff. It sounds like the two places the directions people will want to go if they're interested in looking in this headless direction are Gatsby and React. Is that right? Do you think those two languages are kind of enough to get people rolling on this?
I would check out Gatsby.js, definitely. And Next.js is another one that's quite popular. Like Frontity is built on Next.js.
Is that Next.js?
Next.
Next.js, got it.
Yeah. Those are the main ones that I'm checking out right now, although there are definitely others.
If someone wants to go and start doing this headless WordPress stuff, you have any good resources for where they can go to learn this kind of stuff? Any online courses or tutorials or websites that you kind of like and are learning yourself on?
So there's a ton of them. I'm actually working on a resource right now to help people get started with Gatsby easier, especially with WordPress workflows, and sort of smooth out a lot of these bumps in the road. It's called Static Fuse. So you can check out staticfuse.com. But then beyond that, there are tons of tutorials on Gatsby.js website. And then you can just look up any Gatsby, any site that has tutorials will have Gatsby tutorials too.
Awesome, man. And I'm assuming staticfuse.com is the kind of new thing you're working on right now, right?
Yeah, so it's a new project
Awesome.
I'm doing where I'm basically helping people get started. A lot of this stuff we've been talking about is kind of confusing, and it's hard to know where to get started. And then even once you get started and you build a site, you're like, okay, what do I do next? And then even after that, you're like, okay, I kind of built a site, but when I build another site, I still don't know if what I did before was the right way to do it. And so it's this workflow and this framework for let's lay everything out. Let's be here's the best way to do it. And here's a repeatable process and some a theme and like a library of
Yeah.
components and things like that to kind of make it all easier to get started.
Nice. Cool, man.
And it's all free. So right now,
The resources are free, or are you doing like a course, like a paid course, or like a paid community thing? Tell me a little bit more about it.
Right now we're just building some open source stuff like Gatsby themes and possibly other themes and plugins and things like that, and like a deploy to Netlify plugin, so that when you're in your Headless WordPress setup, it'll be like, okay, every time my client like publishes a new post, it's automatically going to go deploy to Netlify. I don't have to touch it. I don't have to do anything. So workflow stuff like that.
Nice. All right. That's cool, man. So if people are listening now and you're listening, you're like, whoa, this is a lot of stuff. staticfuse.com. Go and check it out. So you can, because when you're listening to a podcast, it's kind of like, it's a lot of stuff's in the ether. I don't know about listeners, about you, Scott, but I'm like a very visual learner. So a lot of times when I'm listening to podcasts, I'll like have to have a notebook next to me, like writing stuff down. So yeah, you have your very own resource there. You can go to while listening to this podcast for sure. Nice. It sounds like you're very much at the forefront of like wanting to be a leader in this space. Is that something did you kind of discover this Headless WordPress or start playing with this and you were like, wow, like this is super cool. Like I got to do more with this.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a really exciting technology. It's fairly new, and there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of fun problems to solve, and that's where a guy like me likes to be, because I feel like I can actually do something useful in this space. Whereas if I was like going to go contribute to WordPress core, it's like I would not be useful at all. And maybe I would get like a pull request merged in like 10 years from now when I submitted it today. But, that's just not like a good use of my time.
Yeah, I hear you. Same here, probably. Yeah, I mean, as someone who runs a company that manages WordPress websites, it sounds like I have to start looking into this a little bit. When I start thinking about what the future of WordPress looks like, seems like a lot of people are kind of moving in this direction because there's a huge advantage to running WordPress on the back end, but running something static on the front end to speed up sites, to improve security. I mean, there are a lot of advantages, right? We've talked about. So yeah, I may have to continue to pick your brain even after this podcast to hear like, where things are going. So maybe our team can start really digging into some of this stuff. Sounds cool.
Yeah.
You also run your own podcast, WordPress. I don't know what you'd call it. WordPress podcast, entrepreneurial podcast. Well, we're on a podcast right now. So why don't you tell listeners where they can go to check out yours?
Yeah. So my podcast is called The Product Business. And I just talk with other bootstrappers and entrepreneurs about the business of building and selling products. So it's just something that I'm in every day. I'm writing code, building my product. And then I'm also like, okay, now I have to think about like how to market it and sell it. And like, how do I launch a product and what have other people done? And then like, once your product has some revenue, how do I like grow? And so I talked to lots of different people. I had Chris Coyer on recently, Derek Reamer, who was the co-founder of Drip, like Jordan Gall from CartHook, and they just kind of talk about what's going on with their businesses and, their journey.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Theproductbusiness.com is the website.
Theproductbusiness.com. I already found it. As you were talking, I found it already. So yeah.
And that site's on Gatsby if you want to see how fast Gatsby is.
Oh, there you go.
Click around.
Fast.
It's like instant.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. Whoa. It literally is instant.
It is. I'm not joking. Like when I say it's fast, it's not like, oh, it's like a cool managed host fast. No, it's like literally instant, and it's free. Like I'm paying $0 a month to host that site. So.
Amazing. People should for sure like go to this site. Just obviously they should go to listen to the podcast, but also to test out how like this Gatsby on top of WordPress works. Like I'm clicking different menu items, and it's like nothing. There's zero. It's a 0 second load time almost. Virtually zero, like virtually free, virtually zero load. Like
and
all these images
actually,
and all these pictures.
my personal website, scottbolinger.com, is a headless WordPress installation so it's a Gatsby front end and it's run by WordPress on the back end. It's the same type of thing. You can go there and check that out if you want to. And that's using my theme for Gatsby that I'm going to be releasing.
Ooh, he's eating his own dog food, folks.
That's right.
How have you been liking doing the podcast so far?
I love it. And it's not like, I don't think it's going to make me any money. I don't think it's like, the reason why I love it is because I just get to meet other people. And like a funny story, I recorded with Chris Coyer 2 weeks ago. And then I had this guy named Jason Langsdorff, who was a developer for Gatsby, like the week before. So I see on Twitter, Jason Langsdorff is like, hey, I'm going to be in Toronto at this conference. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to Toronto like tomorrow. What is this conference you're talking about? And he's like, oh, it's this thing, Web Unleashed. I'm like, whatever. Okay, cool. I check it out. I like bought a ticket. I'm like, cool, let's meet up for dinner or something. So these are people I've never I never knew before or anything except through my podcast. That's why I'm telling this story. So I meet him for dinner, and then he like brings along Chris Coyier with him randomly. And I'm like, this is so random. And I've never met Chris in person. So I'm like, cool, I get to hang out with Jason and Chris in person for the first time. I've never met him before. And if I didn't have my podcast, I never would have figured it, like done any of this. And like lots of other stuff, just getting to know people better who I don't know very well or whatever. That's been the coolest part for me. And it's also the reason why I'm interested in all this like Gatsby, like React stuff is because of my podcast. Because talking with people on my podcast, I'm like, okay, this is like a really cool thing that people are thinking about. And it like gets me out of my little world where, just reading blog posts or whatever, it just doesn't do the same. So talking with real people in real life and like picking up business tips for my own business. Like I had an SEO guy, Brendan Hufford, and it's basically like a free consultation for an hour. It's like, hey, I have some questions about SEO. Like other people are going to be interested in them, but like also this is helpful for my business. And it's great for them because they get their name out there. And then I also randomly met up with him in Munster, Indiana, because I was driving through there and I'd never knew him before I had him on my podcast. And yeah, so it's just, I think it's like the coolest thing ever.
Well, that's why I tricked you to come on my podcast. I just wanted to talk. I just wanted a free Headless WordPress consultation. So now I'm just going to take it and run with it. I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of people start podcasts because they like the medium and they want to be able to talk with cool people. But that really is, to me, I agree with you, man. I think that like that, to me, that's the most valuable part of doing the WPMRR podcast is that, it like drives a little traffic to my websites and, people buy our course and that kind of stuff. But like the people I meet based on just having a conversation with them on the podcast, all these conversations are amazing. And it always, I think, helps me with how I'm thinking about my business, because even if someone's not giving direct business advice, like there's always, I listen back to a few episodes and there are always like a dozen nuggets that I'll come back through and hear that someone was talking about nothing, but it really is a special little something that they were saying, even if you're reading between the lines. So yeah,
it's like developing relationships with people is definitely the number one thing for me. And then secondary to that is like getting help with my business, getting out of my own world and hearing new ideas. And I think those two things are completely worth all the time that I put into it. And I fully expect to make no money ever and have no financial benefit from this podcast ever. And that's fine. I'm still going to keep doing it.
Yeah, nice. Let's get a little meta to end the episode. On this podcast, I want to talk a little bit about a podcast episode that you did with Chris Coyier. How was that podcast episode? So Chris, for people who are listening who don't know, he runs CSS Tricks. So it's css-tricks.com. If anybody's ever looked for help with CSS, they found this website probably ranking first in search engines. And I didn't know this, but it looks like he has a new project going on that's codepen.io. Anything that you kind of gleaned from that conversation?
One interesting thing we talked about was how CSS Tricks has changed over the years from being just a one-man operation where he was just kind of like spitting out blog posts and like, hey, here's to do something cool with CSS, to now it's like a multi-person operation where, there's other people writing posts and they're spending a lot more time on their content and it's like a much more professional thing. But that's just kind of what they had to do to keep up with the times. And now, we'd also talked a little bit about how like people are commenting less on blog posts. And like if you've been blogging for a while, you'll know that you used to be able to write a blog post. If it was interesting, you'd get like, 10, 20 comments, maybe even more if you have a popular site. But now nobody leaves comments anymore. I mean, like you get a couple here and there, but Chris's thoughts was mostly because it's people just would rather tweet their thoughts than like leave them on your blog. So I thought that was interesting. And we talked about Codepen and how he's he's been doing that for a few years, but it's a pretty big project. Like they got funding and they are, trying to monetize this. So Codepen is like a place where you can put code snippets in a browser and it like runs JavaScript, and you can have your CSS and HTML. So you can be like, here's how I did this cool like drop down in React, and it'll have like the actual code there people can copy and it'll run it. So they're one of the only people doing that who are like actually trying to monetize it, where there's lots of competitors, but like not all of them are doing it free. So it's kind of an interesting place he is, where he's like one of the only people trying to monetize it. So I talked with him about how that's going, and we talk a lot about the stuff we've been talking about too, like React and Jamstack and stuff like that, because he's real big into that stuff too.
Nice. Cool, man. I think that's a great place to start wrapping up the episode. Man, you kind of blew my mind and maybe even blew a few fuses with some of that technical stuff. But I'm sure the technical people listening are definitely digging it. And I'm sure people like me who are kind of like not as technical, definitely interested in what Headless WordPress looks like. I mean, I'm serious, people. Like, go to theproductbusiness.com and like click on the menu items, and like these pages load instantly. I mean, that's something you just don't see with a pure WordPress host. So cool. Why don't you tell people where they can find all your stuff online? Website, domains, or social media, all that jazz.
Yeah, so my podcast is The Product Business. If you search any podcast place, you'll find it there, or theproductbusiness.com. And I'm on Twitter at Scott Bolinger. Those are the best places.
And we won't forget AppPresser, AppPresser,
right.
3 P's there in the middle, .com. If you're doing WordPress stuff and you're thinking mobile app, well, that's all you need to do to go over to AppPresser, because if you're thinking about what WordPress looks like in an app situation, like AppPresser is going to be your solution. Yeah, I'm on the... I think it's a examples page, and a lot of cool people here whose like blogs and like podcasts I listen to like have an app I didn't know, like Art of Manliness. I'm a big follower of kind of that blog stuff. It's like, oh, they have an app. Oh, I should download the app. I didn't even know they had an app. So after this call, I'm running over and downloading the Art of Manliness app built on AppPresser for sure.
There you go.
Cool, man. Last but not least, I always ask you, our guests, to ask our listeners for a little 5-star iTunes review for the show. So if you wouldn't mind giving them a little ask, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, give us a 5-star review on iTunes.
There you go. And you have a podcast as well. So if you're going on for one podcast, you might as well get 2 while you're there. You pulled up the Apple store, go in and just leave 2 reviews. You might as well take 1 more minute.
That's right. Do it.
And if you leave us a 5-star review, make sure you leave Scott's name in the comment, something cool you learned in this episode, so we can forward it over to Scott and say, hey, and give him a thank you. If you're a new listener to the WPMRR WordPress podcast, go back through some old episodes and do some binging. Christine and I, as well, a ton of guests, have talked about a plethora of different topics. And so you can go back through, and whatever you're having a challenge with right now, I'm sure we've done an episode that can help you out. If you have any questions for us on the show, Christine and I love to do Q&A episodes every once in a while. So shoot us some questions at yo@wpmrr.com, and we will get your questions answered on the show. WPMRR.com. If you're an agency or freelancer in the WordPress space and you're thinking, man, I got to focus more on monthly recurring revenue. Well, that's what we do at WP Buffs, and we have open sourced everything we do at WP Buffs distilled it into a nice video course for you. So you can go check it out, manage WordPress sites, do 24/7 support, focus more on monthly recurring revenue. That is all for this week. We will be in your podcast player again next Tuesday. Scott, thanks again for being on, man. It's been real.